Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Vipercast, your one-stop place for everything Vegas Vipers. Now, this is a brand new series I'm starting. As you may have seen, if you're on this video, I am now Vegas. As you may have seen from the clicking on this video, I'm now Vegas Gridiron Network. I rebranded it a little bit just to be not just exclusively Raiders, but also talking about just general Vegas professional football. So basically that just means I'm going to be talking about not only the Las Vegas Raiders, but also the Vegas Vipers of the XFL. Now, if you guys have been following, I highly recommend you guys try and follow the XFL just a little bit. Me personally, I think it's a great idea. I love the idea of spring league football. If you follow my Twitter, you know I was a big USFL guy. I live streamed the finals because the Philly Stars were in it, which are my team because there's no Vegas team. I also really like Case Cookies and just the squad they had there. But I think that you guys should really give it a try. I highly endorse the XFL. The XFL 2.0 was a big success in my opinion. It just got shut down because of COVID. It was a lot of fun. It was a ton of fun watching. You got players like Taylor Heineke, PJ Walker, and a bunch of other players who are now in the NFL, in the USFL, just in between leagues and stuff like that. And even in this recent XFL draft, you have former NFL players coming to the XFL who are trying to either show that they still have it to maybe get back onto NFL squads. You also have young players who didn't get drafted or were undrafted for years or recently undrafted and just want to prove and put tape out there, say, I can play at the professional level. Give me a shot. I want to try and be in the NFL. I think that the USFL and XFL are really not really trying to focus on being a competitor with the NFL. That's just impossible, especially at this point back in the 80s, in the early 2000s, even then. But when the USFL was really big in the 80s, they were trying to be a direct competitor. It didn't work because they didn't have enough money to shell out, and the NFL eventually won. At this point, these two leagues are just trying to be a way for players to either continue to get a paycheck, to just maybe play as this is their permanent spot. They just want to play in the spring league, or just to try and get back into the NFL. That is the main goal of a lot of these players, or just get into the NFL on practice squads, on full rosters, anything like that. So I highly suggest you guys try and watch it, support it, especially the Vegas Vipers, especially if you're a Raiders fan, especially if you're watching and you're a Raiders fan, you should definitely support the Vegas Vipers. They have Rod Woodson and they have some other players that were former Raiders and just a bunch of players that I think you guys will really enjoy watching come. Yesterday they had, they had their draft. There was a 3-day draft, not 3 rounds, it was a lot of rounds, but 3 days of drafting. The first day was just the QBs. They just announced who their QBs were. It wasn't really a draft for the QBs. They had predetermined choices of who their QBs were going to be. They pretty much established who they were going to choose as their QBs, before that day. That's just how it worked. Especially this whole draft really was just like, who do you want? All right, you can have him, but we're just going to make official announcements, stuff like that. Because they didn't have a lot of time. There's not a lot of tape on these guys. They had, tryouts and, stuff like that. Some players are still under contract with the USFL or with NFL teams, so they don't have a chance yet, but there's going to be a supplemental draft in early 2023 for those players that didn't get a chance to get drafted, this recent draft. So you definitely see a few more players, especially from the USFL, that will join the XFL in early 2023 before the season starts in February. But today, I'm just going to be focusing on the Vegas Vipers, and I'm just going to be focusing on just the general, important people, that I thought were, good people to look at, to think about, to just have in your mind before you start watching and paying attention to the Vegas Vipers. I highlighted Raiders players. I highlighted Vegas people, people from Vegas or who went to college near or around Vegas, and then also just players that I think will be the stars of the team, will be big contributors to the team. But yeah, now let's just get into it. I've been talking a while, so let's just get into the video. It's going to be a long one, so stay tuned. To first start off with former Raiders who are currently on the Vegas roster, who were just drafted by Vegas. The first one that was a pretty big name was Martavis Bryant. Now, he wasn't really a Raider for long. He was only a Raider in 2018, but he was originally drafted by the Steelers all the way back in 2014, and he made a lot of contributions to the Steelers. He was a pretty solid receiver. He had almost 2,000 yards with them, 13 touchdowns, and just had really big playability. His average yard per catch was like something like 15 yards per catch or something like that. He was a pretty solid receiver with the Steelers. He was traded to the Raiders in 2018 for a third-round pick, and then he just kind of fell off a cliff, as most players do when they come to Oakland, especially, or Vegas, wherever the Raiders are, they usually fall off a cliff. But that Raiders team wasn't very good. He wasn't good. He had a lot of drop issues. He had a lot of injury issues, and eventually he had some drug issues as well. And he was just kind of like low-key blacklisted from the league, so he never really got a chance again to play. He bounced around CFL teams and stuff like that. So this is really his first chance to play in almost 4 years. We'll see how it goes. It's a long time, but he is only 30, so he still probably has some in the tank, especially he hasn't had any injury concerns the past 4 years, or a risk of injury or anything like that. I wish him the best. It's not really his fault sometimes that he, didn't play well in the Raiders. But again, I'm just highlighting players who were on the Raiders at any point. But I think this is a great pickup. He was our first pick other than QB. I think it was a great pick. He has insane NFL experience, and if he can get back to his pre-Oakland days, I think this is going to be a massive pickup in terms of just player potential. Next up, we have Jeff BADET, or Jeff BADET. I'm not sure how to say his name. I won't say BADET because it's French. But he's a wide receiver. He is very, very fast, a 4.27. At the combine he ran, which is very fast for a 40. That was the fastest back in, I believe it was 2018 was his draft class. He's very much a burner. He had 16.5 yards per carry across his career, and has bounced around NFL teams and practice squads. He ended up on the Raiders back in 2020 and actually started only one game, or played one game. He didn't even get any significant stats or anything like that. However, he played in XFL 2.0 with okay stats and played in USFL 2.0 with only one catch just because he had injury concerns. But this is very much a big play possibility wide receiver. Again, another player who has a lot of potential. He's still a very young wide receiver. He's under the age of he's about 26 probably at this point. So still young, still has a lot of potential, and still, he was an NFL prospect before coming to the spring league. So this is definitely a launch point for him if he can really perform. Now, probably the biggest name that we've seen enter any spring league since the USFL back in the 80s, Vic Beasley, outside linebacker, who was a former top pick in the draft from Clemson. He went to the Falcons, and in 2016 he had 15.5 sacks on their way to a Super Bowl. He is first team All Pro. He had a Pro Bowl that season, and after that, he only had 18 sacks for the next 4 seasons, but he was a solid contributor overall for the Falcons. Outside of that season, he wasn't, elite ever again. But he contributed. In 2019, he had 8 sacks. And then when he went to, once again, when he went to the Raiders, his career, but he was in Tennessee before that, never really got significant snaps. Same thing with Oakland. He never, it was Oakland. Never got significant snaps, never put up any stats really. It was mostly a practice squad player, mostly not really dressed for game day. But this is the biggest name player that we've ever gotten of recent. By far the most accomplished NFL level player we've ever had in a spring league since the 80s. So I think this was an incredible pickup. When I saw his name, I was like, Vic Beasley, he's in the XFL. That's crazy. I'm excited for him. He's on the other side of 30 now. So he is older, but let's see if he's got some juice left in the tank. If he's got some juice left in the tank, he should be a freaking monster in this league, because we're talking about, undrafted free agent level or lower, O-lines. So if you have former All-Pro, former consistent starter for 4 seasons and playing against these players, it's going to be an absolute just mauling if he can get back to, especially if he can get back to that 2016 level. It's going to be game over for the league. He's going to be Defensive Player of the Year. So I'm going to call it now. This is a low-key Defensive Player of the Year potential for Vic Beasley, just based on potential of an NFL experience alone. But I'm excited to see what he can do. Next up, we have the just Vegas guys, people who were formerly in Vegas, went to college in Vegas. There's only two guys. So it's Isaiah MACKLIN. He was born in Vegas. He's a very young wide receiver. He's supposed to go in this recent draft in 2022, but he was undrafted, and I don't think he really signed with anyone. And kind of hard to find stats and information on him, just because he was from a NC Central, which I don't even know where that is. Obviously North Carolina, but where in North Carolina? Central, but where? I don't know. Anyway, but he's 6'5", 200 pounds. He was a tight end at NC Central, but he's a wide receiver again after being a wide receiver at San Diego State. So he's back to being a wide receiver, but he's a big body wide receiver or tight end. I'm not sure where he's going to play, but he's a big body guy. He's a big guy. Should have some potential there. I don't know. There was a lot of stats. There's not a lot of anything. I'm just highlighting him because he's from Vegas. He was born in Vegas. I was going to say here, but I'm not in Vegas right now. I don't live in Vegas. Anyway, moving on. Next up we have Clayton Bradley, which some of you, if you follow UNLV football, you might recognize his name. He was a graduate. He didn't play entirely at UNLV, but his senior season, he played pretty well for the pretty bad overall UNLV team, but he's a monster, 6'6", 300 pounds. One of his draft profile is basically like he's insanely big, but he needs to work on fundamentals. But in the XFL, his size alone should be enough to stop a lot of the linebackers, outside linebackers, edge rushers, and stuff like that he's going to be facing. But if he can get that fundamentals back up, he might be able to get back in the league, because being 6'6", 300 pounds as a tackle, he has potential. Now we're just going to be talking about players of note. These are players that I think are important to highlight and talk about just in general. So, yeah, here we go. So, first up, we have Luis Perez, QB. He's been in and out of the NFL, in and out of spring leagues. He was in the AAF, USFL, XFL. He's been in everything. He's very, very lucrative. He's been a very good spring football player. That's why he's always here, because he's always good. He's perfect for spring league. He's very, he's just a good QB. He's obviously not NFL level QB, but he's good. He's upper echelon of what a spring league player is. Last season in the USFL, the most recent season, obviously, because the last one was back in the 80s. He was a part of the QB system in New Jersey and the New Jersey Generals, but he still had 1,200 passing yards, 70+ completion percentage, which is pretty crazy, and 9 touchdowns to 1 interception. So he's a very efficient passer. I think if he's in a 1 QB system, I think he should have a very excellent, especially passing to Martavis Bryant and all the other wide receivers I've talked about. He should be one of the better QBs in the league. Obviously, he's competing with some other bigger names like Kyle Sloter and AJ McCarron. But I think he should definitely be in the upper echelon. And talking about the other QB is JALEN McClendon. And let me tell you, it was very hard to find information on him because he only has 23 starts in college across 5 seasons, I think he had in college. He was invited to the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, and his stats were nothing. He was the 3rd string QB there. He's out of Baylor. Was his final season. I don't even know where he went beforehand. I forget. But his size and frame and potential, I guess, is why they drafted him. I'm not really sure. Obviously there's tape out there that I haven't seen. There's, the recent, they had practices and stuff like that to get tape out there as like their own individual combine that no one else went to. So obviously they saw something in him that I can't find. It was impossible to find, information on the Collegiate Bowl itself. The 2019 one was just non-existent on YouTube. I had to find it on Pro Football Reference and then click the link to box score, which was on ESPN buried somewhere. So anyway, so if you're trying to find it, it's going to be a little bit. But yeah, it's just his 6'5", 200 frame and a solid arm. It could be something. They might be trying to run another 2 QB system. That's just my theory at this point. Because being 6'5", 200 pounds, he could definitely, run the ball pretty well, I would imagine. So if they run a 2 QB system, Luis Perez is used to it, so he knows how to run that. I think we have a solid enough QB in Luis Perez, and if JALEN McClendon can turn into something, then great. If not, he's a very raw prospect who's going to have some work. on his fundamentals and just everything, honestly, because only 23 starts across 5 years of college is just not good. There's just not a lot of tape out there, not a lot of just information on him. So, I hope he does well, though, because I want the Vipers to win it all. Up, we have Donovan West, who's a center. He was another player who was supposed to be drafted in the most recent draft. He's 21 years old, which is extremely young. Usually O-line tend to be older for some reason. I don't know why. I honestly have no idea. Usually those types of players tend to be older, but he's 21, so it's very interesting to me that he did not get drafted just because of his youngness. He's projected to be a 6th round, was not even picked up. He was probably signed somewhere, but then got released. Great opportunity to show NFL teams what he's made of. I think this could be a potential very good pick. Just coming fresh out of college, you'll have that immediate, already being ramped up from college, already have that being warmed up. He should be good, I think. Next up, we have tight end Brandon Dillon. He was an absolute monster in his senior year. 105 receptions for 1,600 yards and 14 touchdowns. Signed with the Vikings as an undrafted free agent. That's across his career, but still, that's a monster career as a tight end in college at a very no one knows university. Signed with the Vikings as an undrafted free agent in 2016. He played 4 games in 3 seasons with 1 reception for 6 yards as his only NFL experience. He's a big guy, should be a pretty good tight end. That's all that matters. Just based on his college stats alone, he should be just fine in the XFL. He should definitely be someone that would be a great red zone threat, in my opinion. We have Matt Jones. He's a running back. He's a former 3rd-round pick to the then Redskins back in 2015. Solid third down back in his rookie year. He had a lot of receptions and a lot of rushing. He was a split between that, so it says to me 3rd down back. He faded out after 2017. He never made it back into the league. He went to Indy and just faded. He's played in St. Louis in XFL 2.0. He had 314 yards and 1 touchdown in 5 starts in the only 5 games that was played that season. So he still has, he showed what he showed in the NFL and the XFL. So I think he's a very good veteran running back. I think he has the experience in the NFL that will help any young running backs, develop or anything like that. But overall, I think this is a pretty good, safe signing. I think he should perform just fine. If no other running backs work, he'll be the safety valve. He'll be just fine because I think he just has that experience and has that potential to be obviously NFL player. So, I think that's enough to have a very strong starting point for your running back room. This next guy is the guy I'm probably most excited for other than Vic Beasley and just like the known players. This guy, DeAndre Torrey, running back, declared for the 2022 NFL draft, not drafted, and wasn't tried out until August. So that's crazy. He was signed by the Michigan Panthers in June, but that was after their season was done. But I can't believe he was not on an NFL roster. His potential is just insane. He did go to a CUSA school, so he doesn't have insane competition, but his senior season alone should just give him a roster spot. So I'm expecting, this is my player to watch. This is the player that's going to light up the league. If his potential that I see, just based on box score alone that I see, he should light up this league. His senior season was 1,215 rushing yards on 248 attempts, so it's 4.9 yards per carry, which is pretty good. And he had 13 touchdowns. 13. His rookie year of college, he had 15 touchdowns and nearly 1,000 yards rushing. He has that potential to just destroy the league, in my opinion. He might just be the best running back in the league, just based on that alone. He's young. He has that potential. His draft profile had him at a late round or undrafted, status, and he was just not picked up. And I'm boggled that he's not picked up. That's how much I'm excited for him. He should be on a team, so I'm definitely excited that he's on the Vipers because he should play very well for us. I'm so excited for it. DeAndre Torrey is my guy now. I want to try and get him on the show because he's my guy now. This is my guy. So on the defensive side of the ball, we're going to be talking about, first off, Jameson Houston, who's a cornerback. He played in the USFL. He was a lockdown corner out of Baylor. He's solid on the field, no athleticism like when testing, but he is very solid on the field. Bounced around practice squads in the NFL, and he in the USFL 2.0 on the Michigan Panthers, a very bad USFL team. He still had 2 interceptions, 40 plus tackles, multiple pass breakups, and consistently played well on a relatively overall just bad team, just bad defensive team overall as well. I think this is a great pickup. Veteran-ish. He has a recent experience in the USFL to make an impact. He was signed also by the Seahawks in the offseason, but he was not retained. I'm excited for him. I think he should be a very solid contributor overall. I see no reason why he won't, especially when you're being coached by one of the best DBs of all time in Rod Woodson. Next up, I'm going to talk about Maurice Smith, who's a defensive back, veteran presence in the backfield. Wasn't a starter, or in the back end, I should say, not the backfield. Wasn't a starter in college until he went to University of Georgia, where he recorded 2 interceptions and a pick 6, 50 tackles, and a sack in his senior season. So that was a pretty good senior season. He was at Alabama before then, transferred in the senior season, super senior season, which is what I call the 5th year. And bounced around NFL teams, went undrafted after he went undrafted. He recorded some tackle stats in Miami, which is where the team he was undrafted signed to. I don't know how to say that. But his last team was Tennessee in 2021. But I think he should be a solid, again, another solid player overall. He has experience. He has obviously potential to be pretty good. So I'm excited to see what he can do. Just DBs in general is very hard to, just a lot of these players are hard to find, especially when I'm not going to be digging through tape. I'm not a tape guy, and it's going to be impossible to find any tape on these guys because these are just very much background players to who would end up being stars and who would end up going to the NFL and being, drafted in the NFL. But yeah. Anyway, I'm going to finish this off, and then I'm going to go on a whole spiel about that. So Robert Windsor, defensive tackle, 6th-round pick in 2020 to Indianapolis, 19 TFLs, 13 sacks, 3 forced fumble returns, 120 tackles in 4 seasons at Boston College. Should be a force with Beasley on the line. I think that those two together are just going to create havoc for everyone else in the XFL. So we have the final person is DJ Calhoun out of ASU, linebacker. He recorded 37.5 TFLs, 19.5 sacks, 7 pass deflections, 2 forced fumbles, 237 tackles. Just an absolute beast. I don't know how he went undrafted and not retained or anything like that. This is his first opportunity to play since college. So again, another one of those players that hasn't played in a while, but he has the potential to be a pretty good player, especially when we're talking about going from college to XFL. The gap is not as big as going from college to the NFL. So if you can even get half of what he did in college in the XFL level, he'll be a pretty good player. So this has been a pretty long video. I apologize and I appreciate if you guys stuck around. If you did, like and subscribe. But just in general, the Vipers and the XFL are a great opportunity for a lot of players who did not get their shot in the NFL to show what they can do. Same thing with the USFL. That is why I support these leagues so much. I think it's very important for the football ecosystem going forward to have these leagues where players can show themselves, put on tape what they can do as players. Give them a chance to show why NFL teams made a mistake on missing them in the draft, and just make their dreams come true. Let them get back into the league, or let them get into the league in general. There's a lot of players drafted that never even made it to the NFL that were recent draft picks. So I think that's a very good sign for the league that they're not only getting these old veterans that were, never really made it in the NFL, which is a bunch of practice squad guys. These are players that have never even made it to the NFL, but are trying to get in by playing in the XFL. It's a huge risk, especially for those young guys, because it's the injury potential that could just end their career forever. If they get injured in the XFL, there's not a guarantee they even make it back into the XFL or the USFL or anything like that. So taking a big risk, and I think it's very important that if you enjoy football, if you enjoy the NFL, if you like rooting for players, if you want the underdog to win, which is what I love, I would follow the XFL. I would follow the USFL. I would especially follow the Vipers. They're a Vegas team. If you're a Vegas fan of anything, if you're a Raiders fan, follow the Vipers. Rod Woodson's their coach, who's, a former Raider, former Steeler. He was a Hall of Fame player. I'm very excited for this team. I hope you guys are too. And if you are, don't forget to subscribe here. I'm going to be covering both Raiders and Vipers as both seasons go on. As the Vipers get closer, I'm probably going to stream their games as well. I want to make sure that you guys get to see as much as you can. I'm going to provide as much content for this team, especially just US XFL in general eventually, but especially the Vipers. So don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to comment. Let me know if you guys are excited, if you're going to follow the XFL, just in general, just stuff like that. I hope you guys had an absolutely wonderful day, and peace out, Raider Nation.